What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel and happy Halloween. I wanted to cover way more spooky season stuff this spooky season, but I didn't get around to as much, so I do plan to do a couple of little extra spooky season things after October is over. But today, I'm very happy to be talking about one of the most popular horror films of 2024 that I just got around to and I had heard so much about, and that film is called Late Night with the Devil. Written and directed by Cameron and Colin Cairnes, this film stars people like David Dastmalchian, Laura Gordon, Ian Bliss, Ingrid Tovelli, and more. So even though I cover so many films on this channel and I'm pretty up to date with a lot of the big releases, every year there are movies that slip through my fingers that I didn't get around to. And Late Night with the Devil was one of those that I had so many people completely come at me for so many times. Whenever I would talk to my various cinephile friends or horror fans, anytime I mentioned that Late Night with the Devil was one I had yet to see this year, they were always like, dude, you need to rectify that. You need to fix that situation. You need to see it, because many have praised this film as being one of, if not the best horror film of 2024. And it comes from Shudder and IFC Films. And if you guys have been covering this channel or following this channel is what I mean to say, then you'd know that I've covered a lot of Shudder stuff early. A lot of times they send me screeners for their films, and they're kind of a mixed bag for me. Sometimes they have really inventive, great horror, and sometimes they have kind of low tier horror, but they do have a wide array of content on their platform, and my opinions for their content is always all over the place. So when I heard they had a couple of their films coming out in theaters this year, with Late Night with the Devil being one of them, I was definitely intrigued, and I planned on checking it out in theaters. I never got around to it, and then here we are now, months later. But now that it's on streaming, and I actually got sent a screener for this film all these months later to kind of, review it now, I was like, all right, I think it's finally time to talk about Late Night with the Devil. But before we get into my thoughts on the film and my personal take, let's get into what this film is all about. So the movie opens up, and the film is framed within the idea that you're watching a documentary of sorts, or some sort of TV special that specifically is focusing on a man named Jack Delroy, who was a late night host in the 70s, who was really well known for being incredibly popular, one of the rising stars in late night television, who unfortunately kind of started to lose that luster, started to kind of dim in terms of his light, and eventually found himself becoming a bit of a gimmicky late night host. This documentary is going to show us, though, one night where things went absolutely haywire, a Halloween evening that was the lost episode of Jack Delroy's TV show known as Night Owls. And over the course of the movie, we also get to see footage that's behind the scenes of what was happening in between commercial breaks. This is the way that the film is framed up, as the film is kind of treated almost like a documentary, like you're being shown this after the fact. And so this movie takes us into that one crazy night that Jack Delroy's show went absolutely haywire, where he decided to have on a couple of guests for Halloween, specifically an individual who can speak to the dead, another individual who's a skeptic but also a magician and is there to kind of criticize the things that he's hearing and seeing, as well as an author of a book who is actually tied to a young girl who is actually possessed by a demon. And over the course of the film, things start to get a little bit creepy, eventually spooking out all of the individuals who are working on the show, Jack Delroy himself, and the audience. And as time goes on, things start to go south. And that's the base premise of the film. I actually don't want to use this video, as a lot of times like I would do, to talk about this film on a spoiler level, because I think this is one of those films that a lot of people haven't seen. I'm not the only one, and I've talked to so many people who are horror fans who have yet to get to this one. It's one of those really popular horror films of the year that also didn't get that big wide release push across the board that everybody has talked about, and there's so many people I know who have yet to see this. So I say all this to say that if you haven't seen Late Night with the Devil, I'll start this off by saying that I think it's absolutely worth your time. Firstly, this film is supposed to be set in the 70s. Of course, we're being shown footage. It's being treated in the sense that you're seeing footage way after the fact. But when it comes down to those elements of being a period piece, I think it does an incredible job when it comes down to wardrobe, hair, and just overall costume design, the locations used. And in a lot of ways, it's a chamber piece. The entire film takes place just there in this TV set, this like auditorium with the people that are there for this TV show. It doesn't branch outside of that in any way, shape, or form. It stays in that one location. And keeping a film in one location, it can be hit or miss. There are some films that do it beautifully and are able to tell really great, compelling, and exciting stories. And there are some films that will leave you absolutely bored that you're staying in the same location the entire time. Late Night with the Devil, though, thankfully is one of those films that absolutely kills it. And I think, being able to be on a TV set and, being able to play with the various locations behind the stage, in front of the stage, with the audience, allowed them to kind of keep things different over the course of time. And when it comes down to making it feel like it's from the 70s, all the actors do a great job in their inflections and the dialogue to very much feel like they are people from the 70s and kind of have those mannerisms of people from decades ago. So when it comes down to that period piece element, I was really impressed. And when it comes down to the performances across the board, David Dastmalchian is an actor I've really enjoyed, and I heard he was incredible in this film, and I think this is definitely my favorite performance I've ever seen from him. While I've enjoyed him in so many things, a lot of times depending on the role, he could be a smaller role or something that's kind of helping another role throughout the course of the film. He's a great supporting actor in so many movies and TV shows, but being able to see him here in the limelight and be this, big TV show host is really great. I thought he did an incredible job in this role. And over the course of time, as things start to go haywire, as the young girl that he has on starts to unleash this demon within her over the course of the show, and he finds himself freaked out just as much as the individuals who are around watching this all go down, it's his performance, the nuances of him still having to host this television show while being freaked out, that I found to be really compelling over the course of the show, or the course of the movie. It very much felt like you were watching a show, though. It did very much feel like I was watching a true late night TV show, and I think that that's part of what made this film work so much, is that it felt natural. The performances didn't feel like actors putting on a movie. It felt very much like I was watching a true late night TV show from the 70s where things were going haywire. Of course, there are things in the latter half of the film that very much feel like a film, especially as things start to lean a little bit more into the horror element, but I think that for the most part, the film feels very realistic in its performances, and David Dastmalchian's performance I thought was one of the best in the entire film, if not the best. Outside of him, you also have Ian Bliss in here as Carmichael Haig, who plays the cynic, the guy who comes on, who is a magician and is there to kind of question everything that everybody is seeing. And so when we have this young girl who is possessed, he's questioning it. He's being a cynic about it. He doesn't believe it's real. He's trying to prove to everybody that what we're seeing here is a gimmick, that it is a joke, that is something that is meant to kind of captivate people, but is honestly more of a hypnotizing kind of situation than it is a real demon possession that we're watching. And I thought he was an interesting character throughout the course of the mix, who felt like a very real person. And again, I think across the board, the performances are great. Really want to praise the young girl who plays Lily as well, Ingrid Tavelli, who I thought was great in this role. She plays this very sweet and innocent but very creepy character throughout the course of the film, because she is possessed and you don't really know if she's showcasing that demon at all times. Is the demon fully in control? Is the demon only taking control when she lets it take control? Is there any real time where you're talking to this young girl, or is it consistently this evil entity that's within her? And I thought that her performance was great, because she captured, again, this balance of cute and innocent, but also pretty terrifying, and I thought she did a great job. And the rest of the supporting cast is great. I definitely don't want to sit here and say that those are the only great supporting roles or the roles in the film. For the most part, I was really impressed when it came down to all the performances in the film, and again, how natural it made it feel. So when it comes down to the period piece feel, when it comes down to the performances, everything about it made it feel like I was watching a real late night TV show from the 70s, and it just kept me engaged. I really never found myself bored when it came down to those elements, and overall I just found that the film in general was very exciting to watch, while also being filled with tons of levity. There was tons of great moments that are meant to feel like, you have a real life late night show going on here. You have a host that needs to kind of poke fun at things and try to make the audience laugh at home and the audience in the arena or in the auditorium that they're in. And so there's that element of him still having to run this show and having these small little quips and jokes that you would see in a late night show, but you have this creepy thing going on around it that oftentimes allow there to be a nice balance of creepy and eerie, but also some great sense of levity. And I think that having David Dastmalchian at the top of all this, he just did such a great job of balancing all that throughout the course of the film. Now, if I had to lean into any negatives that I had with this film, though, I would say that there's an element to this film around David Dastmalchian's late wife, his character's late wife, Jack Delroy's late wife, that did pass away from cancer. And she is a part of this film as time goes on, her spirit in a way, and I don't want to give away too much there, but I do feel like it was a big enough part of the film to mention, but it was also not explored nearly enough for me. That was an element of the film that I felt was just kind of present, and by the time we got to the end, while it does have some key moments, especially by the time we get to the end of the film, I found myself kind of struggling with that element because it felt like it was prominent enough that I felt like I needed a little bit more, but it wasn't in there enough that I ever felt like it was really impactful enough for me. And it was the only thing that by the time I got to the end of the film, I was like, I wish there was a little bit more done there. But when it comes down to the rest of it, when it comes down to making it feel like you're watching this behind the scenes lost episode of a, late night TV show from the 70s where things went creepy and haywire, and also just having its own identity and feeling unique, I think that Late Night with the Devil is one of the best and most unique horror films that I've seen in the last few years, but definitely in the year of 2024. I think it's definitely worth your time if you're a fan of horror. And I think that even if you're not a fan of horror, this film isn't really scary. I think that this film does a good job of just being an interesting and fun film that has its own identity, that feels unique. We've seen films that take place on a TV set before. We've seen films that are meant to feel like you're watching a real life, event of some sort. And a lot of times, depending on how they're executed, it can just feel like another movie. But in the case of Late Night with the Devil, I think that it's got a unique premise. It's got its own identity, and it feels unique, and it feels like it's fresh. It feels very fresh. It feels very different in the realm of horror. And I think this is definitely one of the best things to come from Shudder in quite some time. So I honestly look forward to rewatching this movie at some point. I think it's definitely a film you should check out in this spooky season. Of course, we're now at the end of the spooky season, but I think it's definitely something that's still worth your time. I believe it's now available on Hulu and Disney Plus if you have Hulu, and it's on Shudder as well. It's on a couple other places outside of Shudder. Obviously, they're trying to give this film a little bit more of a wider reach, and I certainly recommend it. I think it's a film that if you're a big horror fan or if you're a big film fan, it's definitely worth your time. Definitely check this out before 2024 is over. But a big thanks to all of you guys for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed some of the spooky content and Halloween related content that I had over the course of the month. Again, I am going to sprinkle a couple more that I wanted to do into November's just to kind of have a little bit of a longer lasting spooky season. I never get tired of the spooky stuff, but I look forward to hearing all of your guys' thoughts down below. Are you a fan of Late Night with the Devil? Do you not like this movie? Whatever the case may be, leave any and all comments down below, and I'll see you beautiful people in the next one. Bye-bye, and happy Halloween.